Russia must be wondering how much of this it's going to have to take. With every day that passes, more news of long-range Ukrainian strikes into the deep rear and directly on Russian territory breaks. And if Russia hasn't figured it out by now, then it really needs to learn one indisputable truth. Whatever air defenses it has are utterly failing to stop Ukraine's drones. Over the weekend, Ukraine struck Russia twice in one night, and these aren't any old strikes. They've led to two of Vladimir Putin's major war lifelines erupting into giant fireballs, as Ukraine once again sent a message that Russia has already learned loud and clear. Ukraine can hit deep enough into Russia to make it hurt. On August 24, Euromaidan press reported that Ukraine launched a devastating and extremely coordinated overnight strike that resulted in damage to a pair of key Russian targets. The first, and perhaps the most important, was the Ust-Luga port, which is in the Leningrad oblast and is one of Russia's most important energy export processing ports. That alone would have been bad enough for Putin, but Ukraine decided to go one better. Open wound, insert salt, seems to have been the approach, as Ukraine's second strike was against the Syzran oil refinery in the Samara oblast. Yet more Russian refined oil is burning. Let's start with the Ust-Luga strike. In its report on the strike, the Kyiv Independent says that the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces has already revealed that it was behind an attack on a port that Russia never believed Ukraine would be able to hit. The outlet spoke to an unnamed source inside the Security Service of Ukraine, or SBU, who confirmed Ukraine's involvement and provided the reason why Ust-Luga was targeted. Russia trades oil and gas through this terminal with the help of a shadow fleet. Drone sanctions from the SBU reduce the inflow of foreign currency that Russia needs to wage war, the source said. The terminal that he mentions is a gas condensate and refined fuels terminal. So, this wasn't an attempt to take out a ship or cause damage to the port itself. Ukraine identified a vital asset inside Ust-Luga and struck it with devastating precision. Remember that message mentioned earlier? Ukraine being able to hit a specific gas condensate and refined fuels terminal in a port as large as Ust-Luga shows Putin that his enemy's drones are no joke. They're fast, accurate, and can deliver devastating explosive force. Euromaidan Press has also shared a photograph and short video on its X account, showcasing the aftermath of the Ukrainian strike. In the photo, a thick black plume of smoke is seen rising into the air thanks to flames engulfing the condensate fuel complex Ukraine claims to have hit. The video is a little less clear, with the view somewhat obstructed. However, it shows the flames and smoke from a distance. The very notable sound of sirens can also be heard in the background, which indicates that this was absolutely an emergency situation for Russia. Another report on the strike comes from New Sky, which says that Ukraine's drone attack took place at 2 a.m. That's an interesting fact. The video just mentioned appears to have been shot in the daytime, perhaps during the early morning. The sky is certainly light enough to show that it's not nighttime, meaning the Novatek terminal fire in Ust-Luga raged for hours until, according to officials, the blaze was extinguished on August 24. New Sky adds that the massive blaze was caused by Ukraine's drones scoring direct hits on several fuel tanks, which erupted after explosions set them ablaze. The same outlet also notes why Ukraine chose Ust-Luga ahead of the many other targets it could have struck. The Leningrad region is key to Russian logistics. It is home to terminals that handle a significant portion of Russia's oil products and grain exports, New Sky says. Of particular importance is the port of Ust-Luga, which the Kremlin is trying to position as a key alternative for circumventing Western sanctions. It's here that Moscow opened a new oil terminal in 2024, investing billions of dollars in expanding capacity. Those billions of dollars that Russia has already spent on the port is far from the only money that it intends to spend. On June 20, Gas Processing News revealed that Russia's majority state-owned VTB Bank had announced plans to pump around $10 billion into further work at Ust-Luga over the next several years. That $10 billion equates to around 800 billion rubles, 300 billion of which will be spent in 2025, with the rest being invested in 2026. Around 200 billion of these 800 billion rubles is going to come from Russia's National Wealth Fund, which is essentially a rainy day fund into which Putin has repeatedly dipped to prop up his Ukraine invasion. Also in June, the Moscow Times reported that this fund is set to run out in 2026, which showcases just how important Ust-Luga is to Russia. The fact that the country is willing to spend from a fund that really needs to be replenished to improve the port must mean that Ust-Luga is a major source of revenue that Russia wants to grow. And Ukraine just threw a giant wrench into those growth plans. Russia, of course, is in its very well practiced denial. It has at least confirmed that a fuel terminal at Ust-Luga caught fire during the early hours of August 24, though anybody who's watched enough of our videos covering Ukraine's long-range strikes knows what's coming next: the drone debris excuse. The Leningrad regional governor, Alexander Drazdienko, took to Telegram to explain the Russian version of what happened at Ust-Luga. On the morning of August 24, 10 UAVs were destroyed over the port of Ust-Luga, he said. The wreckage of the drone caused a fire at the Novatek terminal. Firefighters and the Ministry of Emergency Situations are working to extinguish the fire. It's starting to sound like Ukraine's drone debris is even more powerful than the drones themselves. Of course, it's obvious that Drazdienko's claims that Russia shot Ukraine's drones down, only for debris to cause a massive blaze right where Ukraine wanted to hit, are nonsense. And perhaps a more accurate picture of what really happened can be gleaned from the residents of Leningrad who saw the strike occur. New Sky reports that locals near the port heard and felt explosions so powerful they shook the glass in houses several miles away from the site. The outlet reports one resident as saying, "This has never happened before, even during World War II. The whole town ran out into the street, children were crying, and the authorities say it was a short circuit." A short circuit? Russia makes giving terrible excuses for failing to stop Ukraine's drones an art form with that one. As the residents of Leningrad were seeing flames rise so high into the sky that they could see them from a long way away, another Ukrainian strike was wreaking havoc elsewhere. With this second strike, Ukraine targeted the type of facility that it had hit over and over again during August: an oil refinery. Specifically, the Syzran refinery mentioned earlier in the video. Euromaidan Press's report provides most of the details, noting that the strike took place at a plant that is around 1,056 miles away from Kyiv, highlighting just how advanced Ukraine's deep strike drones have become. It says that local residents reported hearing somewhere in the region of 20 explosions during the night of the attack, though it's unclear what the source of those explosions was. They could have been Ukraine's drones being shot out of the sky, or those drones might have been scoring direct hits on a refinery that's already been hit 3 times before. February, March, and even early August have all seen the Syzran refinery get hit, so it's pretty obvious at this point that Ukraine has established a clear route through to a target that it wants to take out for good. Russia certainly can't claim that the refinery is in good condition. One picture shared by the Euromaidan Press X account shows smoke rising into the air, likely as a result of one of Ukraine's drones scoring a direct hit. The same account also has a brief that appears to show a Ukrainian drone on a downward trajectory towards the refinery. It's hard to see the drone as it looks like a black speck in the sky. However, the result is undeniable. The camera person tracks the speck to where it's landing and a massive explosion is heard, followed by smoke rising. That's an unmistakable direct hit. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces was more than happy to take immediate credit for this strike in a Telegram post. On the night of August 24, 2025, units of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and the Unmanned Systems Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in cooperation with other components of the Defense Forces, inflicted fire damage on the enemy's fuel and energy infrastructure facility, the Syzran oil refinery, Samara region, Russia, the post said. The General Staff also revealed why Syzran was chosen. It points out that the plant handles around 8.5 million tons of Russian crude oil annually, which it turns into refined oil products, including gasoline, aviation kerosene, and diesel. All told, the plant accounts for 3.08% of Russia's total refining capability. That may not sound like a huge amount, but it will become clear why it's important a little later in the video. Now, August 24 was already a very bad night for Russia's faltering air defenses, thanks to this devastating 1-2 combo of strikes. But Ukraine also enjoyed a nice little bonus thanks to its drone attacks, Euromaidan press reports. The outlet says that Ukraine's overnight attack caused disruptions to civilian air traffic, which included the temporary suspension of all flights out of the Pulkovo airport in St. Petersburg. That airport wasn't struck directly. That isn't Ukraine's style. Rather, it was the threat posed by Ukraine's drones and Russia's response to them that forced the closure. Ukraine launched 95 drones across 12 regions, the Russian Defense Ministry eventually reported, and it looks like some of those drones arrived in St. Petersburg. By the way, we have a video covering Ukraine's airport closure strategy to learn more about why the Pulkovo airport closure was such a nice bonus for Ukraine. Check it out to find out about this little known weapon in Ukraine's arsenal. That bonus out of the way, the headline is still twofold. Ukraine just took out a gas condensate and refined fuels terminal and part of an oil refinery in one night. The obvious question now is, what sort of impact are these two strikes going to have on the Russian war effort going forward? In both cases, Ukraine has targeted Russia's energy infrastructure, particularly the products that it sells to other nations and supplies to its own people and soldiers on the Ukrainian war's front lines. At Ust-Luga, this means gas condensate and refined fuels, products that generate vital revenue for Russia's war coffers. That's why the strike mattered. Ust-Luga is a key hub for Russia's condensate and fuel exports, and Russia has poured billions of rubles into expanding its capacity. Ukraine's attack not only damaged a major asset, but also sent a warning that Russia's imminent investment in Ust-Luga can be undone overnight. The EU is at least trying to do something about Europe's collective reliance on Russian gas, given that it's clear that the bloc is helping to fund Putin's war even as it tries to sanction Russia into financial submission. In June, Reuters reported that the EU has proposed a phased ban on all Russian gas imports, with new contracts barred starting in 2026 and existing long-term deals ending by 2028. That's all well and good. But the total ban is also more than 2 years away, and Russia will still be getting plenty of money from Europe for its energy exports in the meantime. So the Ust-Luga strike wasn't just about Ukraine showing Russia that it could strike one of the country's most important ports. It was about damaging a facility that Moscow has poured billions into and relies on for valuable export revenues. Russia can't sell what it can't process or ship. Now, the Ust-Luga strike isn't going to stop Russia from exporting altogether. Far from it, as many more similar strikes would be needed to make that happen. However, that leads to the damage that Ukraine has done to Russia's oil refining, which shows that Ukraine has the capability to strike again and again to cut off the Russian supply. Simply put, the August 24 strike against the Syzran is far from an isolated incident. It's not even the first strike Ukraine has carried out against the facility in 2025, as mentioned earlier. But far more important here is that August has been the month when Ukraine got really serious about causing major damage to Russia's refining capabilities. And it's working. On August 19, United 24 media reported that a series of Ukrainian strikes against Russian refining, which began in earnest toward the end of July and into the beginning of August, had resulted in Russia being forced to shut down refineries to the tune of 13% of the country's total capacity. In other words, in less than a month, Ukraine took out a major chunk of Russia's ability to refine its crude oil into the types of products like gasoline and diesel that its customers, people and soldiers really need. We published a video that took a deep dive into what all of these strikes mean for Russia when the news of this massive loss of capacity first broke. Check it out if you want to learn more. However, there have been a few more developments since that video was published that highlight the impact of strikes like the one Ukraine just pulled off at the Syzran facility. For instance, Russia has started imposing fuel rationing on some of its citizens as Ukraine's constant attacks deplete supplies, Euromaidan Press reported on August 23. The outlet says that Russia's refineries have been the target of 42% of the deep strikes conducted by Ukraine since January, and those attacks have led to such problems that residents of the remote Kuril Islands now have to deal with a 10-litre ration, which is about 2.6 gallons, as Russia scrambles to start buying gasoline from Belarus. Granted, this is rationing on a handful of islands, and the measure hasn't been introduced into the Russian mainland yet. And that's the point. If Ukraine keeps up these strikes against Russian refining, more and more capacity gets taken out. With less capacity comes less fuel, which could force more rationing, which will in turn make it impossible for the average Russian to ignore the war that Putin started. Or, as Discovery Alert put it in an August 19 article, the campaign intensification during summer months is particularly significant, as this period typically sees peak fuel demand within Russia. This timing maximizes economic pressure by threatening domestic fuel supplies precisely when consumer and agricultural demand reaches its annual high point. All of this is without mentioning the impact these strikes are bound to have on Putin's pocketbook. Russia has already implemented a ban on gasoline exports that's supposed to last until August 31, but may last even longer, Reuters reported on August 1st. This was before Ukraine went to town on its refinery strikes, so it seems likely that the shortages forcing these bans and rationing actions are only going to get worse. Of course, there are also the soldiers on Ukraine's war's front lines to consider. If Russia is facing so many supply problems on the mainland, one must wonder how well it's doing at ensuring its soldiers get the fuel they need to run their tanks and vehicles. There are probably supply problems there too, and those problems, rather than being an annoyance as they are for Russia's citizens, will end up causing casualties. Newsguy adds another interesting piece of information to the story. It points out that around 30% of Russia's crude oil exports, along with other refined oil products, pass through the Ust-Luga port. If Ukraine's strike on that port leads to shutdowns, Russia loses hundreds of millions of dollars per week. Plus, it creates reputational risks for Russia as an exporter. Customers on the international market are beginning to doubt the stability of supplies from a country that's unable to protect its own energy infrastructure. This may fuel demand for alternative suppliers, the United States, Saudi Arabia, or Norway, the outlet says. So Ukraine isn't just hitting Russia's fuel supplies right now, it's causing long-term damage that may see Russia fall down in the pecking order when other countries are preparing to renew their contracts for oil and gas products. Mentioned a little earlier was that Ukraine hasn't shut down Russia's energy exports with its strike on Ust-Luga. However, the major problems Ukraine has caused for Russian oil refining with repeated strikes serves as a blueprint for how it could target other critical facilities. If Ukraine can achieve the same level of disruption against condensate and fuel infrastructure as it has with refining, then Russia is in serious trouble, and the odds are that more of these types of strikes will be seen in the coming months. But for now, Russia is licking its wounds. It should be. 2 giant fireballs caused by a pair of successful Ukrainian strikes is a lot of damage to take for a country that's already been put to the deep strike sword dozens of times in August alone. Now, August 24 is also far from the first time that Ukraine hit Russia hard several times in a single night. Just a couple of days before, Ukraine pulled off a deadly triple strike followed by one last attack to seriously weaken Russia's war machine. Find out more in our video, and be sure to subscribe to the Military Show if you want more videos covering Ukraine's latest deep strikes against Russia.